Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the Woodpicker Studio. My name is Lambert, and we're just going to get together and talk about all sorts of things guitar related and guitar playing related and music related and things about the music business and my career and songwriting and recording. And basically, anything else you guys might want to talk about. Now, for this first episode, I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. And my friend Andy Hatfield, a great guitar player and teacher himself down in Peoria, Illinois, suggested to me, or asked me the question actually, how did the Woodstock movie affect you? And I thought, what a great question, because the movie came out, I believe, in 1970, and I was 13 to 14 years old at that time, and I was already a music geek, way into it. Had started playing guitar that year, convinced my dad to get me a guitar, and started playing that. And of course, I knew about the festival. I had read about it, and I had read about the artists, at least some of the artists, and I was familiar with a few names. Of course, I was familiar with Hendrix. And I don't know, maybe The Who. But when it came out, and I was anticipating it, again, I had read about it. And when it came out, I couldn't wait to get there. And if I remember right, it was a midnight viewing over at a theater in Hammond, Indiana. I was growing up in Chicago, so it was just over the state line. We were on the southeast side, down near the state line, so me and some of my friends went over there to see the movie. And I can tell you from the opening scene, where the helicopter is cruising over Yasgur's farm and getting that overhead shot of the crowd and the stage, the crowd which was already in the hundreds of thousands. And the tune Long Time Gone kicks in, the David Crosby tune. And man, I was hooked. They had me immediately. They had me right off the bat. I'm 13 years old. I'm looking up at this huge movie screen, seeing this giant shot of all these people and the stage and everything. And like I said, I was hooked. And, the first day of the festival featured acoustic musicians and folk musicians, so the beginning of the movie was the same. And I sort of knew who John Sebastian was because of the Lovin' Spoonful, Summer in the City, But he walks on stage decked out in tie-dye from head to toe, and I'm just stuck on this. And it wasn't until years later, that I had read the story that somebody had dosed him backstage. He was just there to visit and hang out. And somebody had dosed him, so he was high to the gills. And either he or somebody spilled something on his clothes. So one of the vendors, donated all this tie-dye for John Sebastian to wear. And artists were either late or just not showing up because of the traffic and how difficult it was to get into the festival grounds. So John was there, and the promoters asked him to go up on stage and play, so he did. But I just remember that, him walking up there all decked out in tie-dye. And it was funny, because it just didn't make sense to me when Summer in the City and all of that. And then, of course, Arlo Guthrie. And again, I was 13, so I didn't know anything about Woody Guthrie, and I didn't know anything about Arlo Guthrie. I wasn't hip to Alice's Restaurant or any of that. And he just comes out and he's like, "Far out, man." And again, I'm just stuck to the screen. And he did Coming In from Los Angeles, Bringing In a Couple of Keys, Don't Touch My Bags, If You Please, Mr. Custom Man. And I loved it. I still play that song to this day. And that's where I heard the song. It was in the movie. And then, of course, later on the album, the 3-record set, the 3-record Woodstock soundtrack. Holy cow. So I just loved Arlo Guthrie. And the fact that, him and Sebastian both, that one guy can go up there with an acoustic guitar and entertain all these people. And I thought, yeah, that's something I'm going to do. I'm going to do that. Then, of course, Joan Baez made my heart stop, singing about Joe Hill. And I didn't know anything about organizing or the labor movement. And I didn't know who Joe Hill was, but of course I read about it and found out all about it. And that voice, holy cow. So already I'm just blown away by all of this, and we haven't even got going yet. Out comes Richie Havens. Tall African-American fella with, like a gown, robe kind of thing. Very spiritual looking outfit, Comes wandering out on stage. And not only did he do Handsome Johnny, which was the first time I had heard that, and I guess it's a traditional tune, but, talking about young people going off to war over the years, over hundreds of years, and the loss and the senselessness of it. And, of course, I was well aware of the Vietnam War, and I was only 13, but I became more aware of it, as I got a little older. And, but then he did the tune Freedom. Freedom, 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 freedom. And he sang that classic blues line, that I wasn't hip to too much later. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long, long way from my home. And, man, this was the most soulful thing I think I'd ever heard. And he just blew me away. I was amazed. I don't know what the rest of the folks in the audience were up to or they were doing. Because, it wasn't like it was dead silent or anything in there. Really, because it was like you were at the show. Here's this big movie screen, and the sound was fantastic. But Richie Havens just blew me out. I couldn't take my hands off anything. And I learned years later, that he played all of that in a G minor open tuning. Well, at the time, I'd only been playing for a while, and I was young, and I was just staring and watching his every move, trying to figure out what he was doing. But he's like playing with his thumb, and moving it back and forth along the guitar neck, which, I learned later, of course, that's an old blues tradition to move around like that on an open-tuned acoustic guitar. Anyway, amazing. Amazing. What else about this movie? Canned Heat came on, and Canned Heat was really, really good. But I was too young to get it. I mean, they had something on the radio, that I'd paid attention to. Maybe it was Going Up the Country or something. But I just didn't realize at the time how they were carrying on this old school blues tradition. And, that high falsetto, that high Skip James falsetto. I thought, this guy's got a really weird voice, and all he was doing, of course, was emulating Skip James. And the name of the band itself, Canned Heat, was an old bluesy thing about canned heat being sterno, a can of sterno. And not to keep you warm, but if you put that sterno in some fabric or something, you could wring the alcohol out of it, into a container of some kind. And I didn't realize that at the time, so Canned Heat was cool, but I just didn't get it yet. Oh, what else went on? That Santana. Who was Santana? I didn't know. None of us did. Soul Sacrifice. Now, first of all, it really impressed me that they were a multiracial band. Even at 13, growing up in Chicago, I was well aware of racial tensions and that ugly, ugly thing that it was and continues to be. But there was this multiracial band up there, and with congas and timbales. And I didn't realize the influence of the group, it being so heavy into Latin grooves and all. But Santana doing Soul Sacrifice, without a doubt, changed my life. Without a doubt, changed my life. 30 minutes ago, I was going to be on stage with an acoustic guitar, like Richie Havens, just rocking this big audience. And now, I was going to be on stage with a Gibson SG, like Carlos, ripping it up. Changed my life, no doubt about it. And I still borrow from Carlos today and still play licks of his and still go back and revisit that first record and Abraxas, of course. Amazing. Joe Cocker. Who the heck was Joe Cocker, right? And he came out and did, with all due respect to the Beatles, the Beatles who changed the world, but he did my favorite version of Try With a Little Help from My Friends, without a doubt about it. Oh my gosh. He gave every ounce of his heart and soul in that vocal performance. And of course, I'd never seen anybody perform like Cocker did. And I'll never forget watching it. I can see it in my mind. And I remember a camera shot down to his boots, and the boots were red, white, and blue with stars on them, And this this really got my mom a little angry at me one day, but I had a pair of boots. They were brown boots, kind of dress boot looking thing, and I painted them red, white, and blue and put white stars on them, and she wasn't all into that. But Joe Cocker blew me away in the Grease Band. Oh, man. And, what I noticed years later was Chris Stanton, his keyboard player at the time, played the B3. Skinny fella, long, straight hair. Well, with the advent of YouTube, I'd be watching. And be watching Clapton videos or Crossroad Festival videos, and there he is, playing in Clapton's band. It turns out he's been in Clapton's band for 20 years or something, still going at it. Joe Cocker. I remember going to the Woodstock Museum when I was on the road, and the story about Joe Cocker was his people had sent a demo tape in to the promoters, and they thought he was a black soul singer and hired him. And he showed up and kind of freaked them out because it wasn't what they were expecting. But then, of course, he brought the house down. The Who doing that stuff from Tommy. Needless to say, you walk out of the theater and the next day you're at Heggers Records and you're buying, records by these artists. Talk about influential, And I still listen to that stuff to this day. So the Who is out there doing the Tommy stuff, see me, hear me, feel me, touch me. And the Who were very unique and very British, and up until this point in the movie, that music was all very rootsy and American, Even though Cocker was from Britain and he did a tune by the Beatles, a British group, it was just very earthy and Americana. So the Who was just very unique and very different. And, how can you not be affected seeing Townsend doing the windmills? And Daltrey with that microphone, with the cable folded up and duct taped around his microphone. So when he whipped that thing in the air, the cable didn't break. Amazing. Amazing. Jefferson Airplane. I fell in love with Grace Slick watching that movie. Oh my God. And of course they did stuff from Volunteers. And they did White Rabbit, of course, in the movie. Just really, really cool. And, very American, Americana music. But I think the act that stole the show for me was Sly. So Sly comes on with his band, and again, I'm really impressed. It's a multiracial band, females in the band. The energy, you wanted to get up and dance in the movie theater. And of course, influence, still listen to Sly, of course, still. And he was preaching in that movie, man. He was preaching, and I swore he was looking at me and preaching right at me. And he went right down into my soul and touched it that day. And I just don't think I'd ever been that moved before. Sly was incredible. The Family Stone was incredible. And, You know, Sly, like these other acts, have been with me my whole life, my whole career as a guitar player and a recording artist and an entertainer and a teacher. You know, I often go back to this stuff, especially with young people, to turn them on to it because it meant so much to me and it left such an incredible impression upon me. And believe me, while I watched this movie, I knew exactly what I was going to do the rest of my life. I didn't know how exactly, but I was going to be on stage with a guitar, doing my thing like these people were. Of course, Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix doing the Star-Spangled Banner. And then that slow blues while the camera is cruising over Yasgur's farm. And Hendrix didn't go on. I believe he didn't go on till like 6 a.m. And they had wanted to get him on earlier, and he insisted he was to be the last act on the festival. So he didn't get on till like 6 a.m. and it was the last day. And of course, a lot of people had already left and people still leaving. But that shot of people picking up and cleaning up and just what was left of the festival, it was just the epitome of the perfect music for the perfect scene. And again, in 3 hours, I'd been moved more times than I can remember by music and by performers. And all of these performers were different from one another. Oh gosh, as I'm saying that, I just remembered Country Joe. How could I forget Country Joe? Give me an F, give me a U, and so on. And singing about Vietnam. And we did that chant so many times during our lives. What an impression. What an impression. And again, he was able to speak his mind. He was able to use the First Amendment to speak his opinion about the Vietnam War. And that always stayed with me. Always. Country Joe was phenomenal. But then there's Hendrix, and no better way to close that movie. And if I'd only been there, I'm sure I would have thought the same about being at the festival. And the interviews with people and the classic statements and comments, you know, stay away from the brown acid, stay away from the towers, and just all that cool, interesting stuff. And the culture, you know, that I wasn't aware of at all. Again, I'm 13. I knew nothing about nothing, you know. And here's this culture, and it's about love, and it's about peace, and it's about art. And it laid the blueprint for my entire life up to this point. 68 years old, I still believe it, I still walk it, I still talk it. I'm still playing the guitar. I'm still carrying influences from Cocker's performance and Santana and Richie Havens and Joan Baez and Hendrix and Alvin Lee. Oh, golly, I never saw anything like Alvin Lee. And 10 years after, I'm going home, see my babe. Those fingers flying around that 335 or 345, I don't remember. I think maybe 335. And he played that guitar for 30 years after that, I believe. Anyway, Andy, thank you for the subject and the question. The Woodstock movie has totally influenced me and my entire life and what I've done with my life and how I've gone about my life. So friends, that's about it for today. But I appreciate you stopping in and viewing the podcast, viewing the channel. You know the drill. Please subscribe and like so that I can build an audience here and share the things I know, share the experiences I've had in music and in life in general. And please, we're going to talk about what you guys would like to talk about. So leave comments. Let me know what you'd like to talk about. We'll do that. And till I see you again, peace, have fun, play guitar. We will see you soon. Take care.